As we gather here this morning, once again, the toll rises. Over 822,000 Americans have died from the coronavirus that we know of. Over 8 million have been infected by it. Over 20 million people are out of work because of the coronavirus. It is urgent that we come to agreement to crush the virus, to put money in the pockets of the American people, and to honor our heroes, our state and local workers, our healthcare workers, our police and fire, first responders, our transportation, sanitation, food workers, our teachers, all of whom make our society function and run, many of whom risk their lives to save lives, and now they may lose their jobs, and over 1 million already have, because we have not honored them. We use all authority to thank them and honor them and wish them well if we do not want to allocate the resources necessary to compensate for the money outlaid to fight the virus, to meet the health needs of people in their communities, as well as the revenue lost because of the virus. So we are, again, to protect the lives, the livelihood, and the life of our democracy. We continue to be engaged in negotiations, and I am hopeful that we will be able to reach agreement. We've made good progress this week on the subject of crushing the virus. Crushing the virus. We're so long overdue to have a national strategic plan based on science, funded adequately in order to get the job done. I don't know who or what the administration was relying on since February to neglect or to avoid or decide not to crush the virus. But we have made progress this week, because we will not go forward unless we get to the heart of the sadness of the matter and sadness of the matter. We are not going to be opening up our schools and our economy safely unless we crush the virus. So I'm pleased that we have reached a point where we at least, they still haven't completely signed off on it, but I think we're just about there, that we will allocate, again, the resources and the policies necessary to do that. Health comes into a number of things: testing, tracing, treatment, sanitation, separation, mask wearing, all of the things that science tells us would have stopped the spread of this virus. In fact, a report this morning that had well over 100,000 people who could have been saved if we had engaged in those practices as science dictated, but was not followed. Also is how we fund the healthcare providers, and that is something that we're reaching agreement on, as well as how we fund the vaccination, the vaccine, and the distribution of the vaccine, and how we meet the health needs of people who have lost their jobs and therefore lost their health care, are on unemployment, how we come with some assistance for health care to them. So that's the health care package that I think we're at a good place on. The issue of educating our children, I mentioned safety in the workplace and safety in our schools, essential to crush the virus to make that happen. But in the meantime, our schools should be the safest places in America for our children to learn. Children learning, parents earning. If children can go to school, parents have an easier time of it to go to work. The workplace has to be safe, and that's part of our discussion here. But let me spend a moment on the schools, because it relates to everything we need to do for our children. It only takes, in other words, we can make our schools safe. It only takes money. and really not that much more money than that they have in the bill. But it's not just the money, it's how it is spent. For our schools, we need more space, more classrooms, and therefore more teachers, more support staff. We need better ventilation, technology to address some of the learning responsibilities that we have for our children. It's hard to understand why we would shortchange our children by holding back on what we need to do for our schools. So that remains one of our questions, and I'm hopeful. We exchanged text. We just sent them the most recent text. And in that text, we talk about why we need those resources. And our provenance of our numbers, are the American Association of School Superintendents, well-documented institutional, academic, scientific basis as to why we need more resources to make our schools safe for our children. It seems to me that should be our highest priority, because children are affected so drastically by not being able to go to school. And many children are affected by the virus. You've heard me say again and again, if you're an African American child, you are 5 times more likely to go to the hospital for COVID than a white child. If you're an Hispanic child, you're 8 times more likely to go to the hospital for COVID than a white child. More people of color have died of coronavirus than white people. And that's why our Crush the Virus testing, tracing, treatment was so important, because we have to do what we need to do to make it happen, and to see the impact in the minority community, which they had erased from the bill, but now it is back. So the children, again, from the standpoint of COVID, are affected. From the standpoint of school safety are affected. And another point that affects the children is one thing that we have not received a positive answer yet, but I had been hopeful, we'll see, was to help children in families who've lost their jobs because of COVID, or children who are in families that are falling into poverty. The figures range from 6 to 8 million families more have fallen into poverty because the CARES Act benefits are running out. This can't happen in our country. How can we have a bill that sustains a CARES Act provision that gives $150 billion to the wealthiest families in our country, and won't give a third of that to the neediest families in our country so that they can get back on their feet? The economists in every place on the scale in terms of philosophy and experience, whether they're secretaries of the Treasury or some other academics, they have told us that the best dollars we can spend are the dollars we spend on the neediest. The neediest. They need the money the most, and therefore they will spend it the fastest, injecting demand into the economy, creating jobs. Stimulus. It's also the right thing to do for our families, but it is also stimulus. And that holds true of what we have in the Earned Income Tax Credit refundability, the Child Independent Tax Credit refundable, the Child Tax Credit. It makes a tremendous difference in the lives of these families as they hopefully will return to work and more work, because some of them are still working. These are the working poor. Essential to our children's well-being, whether it's their education or their health or their economic security, is honoring our heroes. I talked about them before. And again, we're not going to have safe schools unless we have strong support not only from the federal government, but also from state and local government, who largely fund over 90% education is funded, public education is funded at the state and local government. The money from the federal government is largely about helping children who are in economically disadvantaged situations, as well as children with disabilities. So again, if you're hurting kids if you're not doing state and local, you're hurting kids if you're not doing enough for education, you're hurting kids if you're giving tax breaks to the rich and ignoring their families, you're hurting kids if you're doing, unless you're doing what we need to do to crush the virus. And then putting money into people's pockets, that's one way, and the other is, we've come, I think, to terms on the direct payments. But we still haven't come to terms on, and I'm sad about this because it's so central to who we are as a people and so called for in our Constitution, and that would be the census and the elections. So that's where we are on that. And again, we're having to make a case to crush the virus at the same time as they are crushing the Affordable Care Act. They're in court, people talk about it's 12 days until the election. It's 19 days before we go before the Supreme Court for the oral arguments to overturn the Affordable Care Act. A goal of this president and Republicans, attorneys general across the country, and the Republicans in the Congress of the United States. That's why they're in such a hurry to confirm a justice who shares their view, as she has written, who shares their view and she's even written about it and criticized the Chief Justice for his support of it. But even on top of all of that, Senator Feinstein asked the nominee if she believed that the Medicare was constitutional, and she could not respond. She did not give an answer to that. She said she could not answer that question in the abstract. Here we have a nominee endangering one of the most sacred American pillars of health and financial security for seniors and their families. I cannot answer that in the abstract. Is Medicare constitutional? No surprise to any of us here, because for years we've been hearing the Republicans say Medicare should wither on the vine. Medicare should wither on the vine. So we have a lot at stake in this nomination, and therefore all the more at stake in this election. One of the things I got the most calls about the hearings was what she said when she was asked about the climate crisis. She said, she was asked if it were happening, and she said, she was asked about the scientific fact that climate change is happening. She called it controversial. I'm certainly not a scientist. I've read things about climate change. I would not say I have firm views on that. Really? Defiance of science. We see it throughout everything we do. Defiance of science and not facing up to the coronavirus so many months ago, where so many lives could have been saved. Defiance of science in terms of saving our planet. Defiance of science in recognizing the need for the Affordable Care Act to meet the needs, the health needs, and in effect the financial needs of America's families because of the cost of health care. And that's exactly what is on the ballot, the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act and the preventive care benefits that are in it, they will be gone and no longer required, because insurance companies would no longer be required to cover essential preventive services, which are some of the most popular aspects of the bill. The most well-known benefit that will be gone is the pre-existing condition protection. That benefit will be gone. Insurers will be able to deny people coverage because of pre-existing conditions. And now COVID has added millions of people to that list. Already about 150 million families are affected by the pre-existing condition challenge and therefore benefit from the Affordable Care Act. Medicaid expansion, states will lose their funding for the Medicaid expansion. And this is, people think of it as a poor children's initiative, and it is, thank God. But it is also a middle-class benefit because much of the money that is spent on long-term care for our seniors comes from Medicaid. Not so much anymore if the Republicans have their way and have a court that does not believe in precedents. Again, all the other things, being a woman, and under the Affordable Care Act, being a woman is no longer a pre-existing medical condition. We're back to that. If your child is on your policy up to 26 years old, forget about that. The list goes on and on. And we talk about the fact that those of us who are involved in the Affordable Care Act, we're so proud that 20 million more people would have access to quality, affordable health care. But it's not just that. 150 million families have better benefits because of the Affordable Care Act. Let me name them again. A benefit of having a pre-existing condition protection, preventive care benefits, Medicaid expansion, women paid more before the Affordable Care Act. You know the list. So in any event, this election becomes very, very important because no matter what the court does, now that they've lined it up against the American people, against their good health, we in the Congress can change all of that. And we've already introduced legislation to enhance the Affordable Care Act because we know any bill can always be better. Any legislation can always be better. But people have to know, don't be afraid of the court, as scary as it is as we approach Halloween. Understand that the election has ramifications. We win the House, the Senate, and the White House will be able to have an even stronger Affordable Care Act to overcome what the Supreme Court may dangerously do. Not even knowing if Medicare is constitutional, and again, criticizing the Chief Justice for his vote in support of the Affordable Care Act's constitutionality when that vote came up. One other subject I wanted to bring up is the subject of the foreign interference in our elections. When I leave here, I will go to a briefing from the DNI and perhaps others. And I'll be very interested to hear what they have to say in a classified briefing. Because everything we have seen in the public domain does not justify the statements that we heard yesterday. We don't want any foreign interference in our elections from anyone. We think intimidation in the election is wrong, foreign or domestic. Foreign or domestic. So to give equivalence to one country and another when we know that Russia has for a long time, 24/7, in the past election and this one, been there to undermine our election. They try to make an equivalence with China. I take second place to no one in this Congress in my criticisms of China, whether it's human rights, whether it's trade violations, whether it's proliferation of weapons technology that are dangerous and sending it to rogue nations. But the fact I know what they're doing, I've tracked them every day for 30 years or a little bit more. But in the public domain, you can see that what they are doing is their usual trying to infiltrate the thinking of people in our country to be sympathetic to China. A lot less to do with the elections. Russia is the villain here. From what we have seen in the public domain, Iran is a bad actor, but in no way equivalent, and they always try to find some equivalence to protect their friend, Russia. I have confidence in the director of the FBI that votes will be protected, that laws will not be violated, and we don't want this message coming out from the DNI now to give people any impression that they should be afraid to vote, that their vote will not be counted as cast. I'll be eager to hear what they have to say. I'm glad I'm having this meeting with you before I hear what they have to say, because everything I've said to you now is in the public domain. Elections are sacred. They should be treated with respect. I don't know what the DNI is up to with this. Hopefully it is wholesome. That remains to be seen. Again, I urge everyone to vote. There's a lot of poison out there. Best antidote to the poison is the vote, Over 30 million people have voted by now? 42 million people have voted already. God bless them, whoever they voted for. God bless them for exercising their sacred right to vote, and to do so in such a patriotic way, waiting in lines and the rest. And I hope that will continue well up until the close of polls on Election Day. 12 days and, let me say, about 10 hours from now in California. And I have to always think in terms of California. With that, I'll be pleased to take any questions you have. Garrett?
Yeah. Forgive my cynicism, but I don't understand your optimism on a deal on the COVID relief. I mean, you're 12 days out from an election with a president you expect to defeat, who you'd need to convince anybody in his party in the Senate to vote for this thing. They don't seem to have any appetite to vote for anything bigger than this, $500 billion package on the Senate side. And we're months into this. I don't understand. Are these talks going just to keep the talks going at this point? I just
no.
see how this happened.
Garrett, let me just say this. If these talks did not have a purpose, and if we were not making progress, I wouldn't spend 5 seconds in these conversations. And I say that in friendship to the secretary. Why would I even be talking to you? And he says the same thing to me. Why would I even be talking to you? So this is not anything other than I think,